Back in 2022, when Netflix released Cyberpunk Edgerunners, it would go on to play a major role in revitalizing the game after what was, let's be honest, a pretty poor launch, especially for consoles. But the dev team did do everything they could to bring it into a playable state, bringing in updates every chance they could. But everything about the TV show was perfect. It encapsulated what the Cyberpunk world was all about in a really nice anime style, whilst also utilizing in-game sound effects, locations, and even mechanics such as the map system, cool IDs, and many other things, giving it that familiar vibe. Whilst we got a glimpse into the world of these new characters from the gang within the show, not much was really known about their backgrounds, how they came to be these fierce Edgerunners, and how they made a name for themselves before they came to meet our new Night City legend of David Martinez. However, now thanks to the original creators of the Cyberpunk universe, Talsorian Games, and their new Edgerunner pack for the Cyberpunk Red tabletop RPG, we are able to finally dive into their origin stories, previous jobs they were a part of, and how they eventually came to be a part of Maine's crew. This isn't a sponsored video at all, however the team at Talsorian Games did give me a review copy of this Edgerunners pack, so I am extremely thankful to them for the early access, and hopefully you guys can check out this new expansion kit for the Cyberpunk tabletop RPG, because it really is a good fun game to play with a few tunes as you experience the story that comes off the back of the Edgerunners TV series, but more on that in another episode. Although if you do want to read the new lore for yourselves, then it's best not to watch this episode, as I will be looking into all the new lore about these characters in this episode here, so there's spoilers to be had. But for now though, let's dive into all of the characters from the Cyberpunk Edgerunners world and see how they got to be in Maine's crew in 2076. These are the origin stories behind all of the members of Maine's Edgerunner crew. We start our list with our Polish-Japanese netrunner Lucy, or her actual name of Lucinia Kushinada. Lucy was born into her family where her father, Takeshi Kushinada, was of Japanese descent and was a veteran of the Fourth Corporate War in the 2020s, the barbaric war fought between the two super corporations of Arasaka and Militech. When the war eventually came to an end within 2025, Takeshi was assigned to the Arasaka garrison within Warsaw, Poland, where he would meet the love of his life there. Lucy's mother, Shima, would be located here within Warsaw, but was actually a member of a Polish netrunners gang named the 404 Squadron. When the two met, Shima dropped her underground gang life and spent all of her time with Takeshi, and eventually settled down with him to start a family. Thanks to these two getting together and being very much in love, Lucy had an extremely positive upbringing, with her saying it was idyllic. Due to their pretty good life, she would attend the best schools, stating that her family lacked for nothing, travelled frequently, and when they did return home from their ventures, they would enjoy a spacious villa and garden in a luxury, gated Arasaka community near Warsaw's northeastern city limits. Essentially, Lucy had a life most could only dream of, and despite her father being a part of the losing faction within the Fourth Corporate War, that didn't seem to affect their livelihoods in the slightest. Warsaw was now their new home, and they were absolutely thriving there. However, like most stories in the cyberpunk world, this was not to last forever, as secrets were being housed within this idyllic household. This all came to light when Lucy, who was now a practicing netrunner at just the age of 7 years old, hacked into her father's computer, where to her horror, she would find all of his achievements that he had accomplished during the Fourth Corporate War. The poor 7-year-old Lucy could not even comprehend what she was seeing on this computer. This man, this loving father that she had only ever known as a brilliant man, was actually a monster in reality. A brutal beast who went around happily murdering people when he was given the order to do so. Granted, Takeshi wasn't the one giving the orders himself, but from what she had found, he never questioned the orders given to him and did this without a care in the world, and had just pushed it to one side to get on with his new life. Lucy was changed from this moment on. Something horrible was brewing inside her as she immediately wanted to rebel against her father and leave her home for good. An opportunity to continue on her net running path and to spend more and more time on the net as a form of escapism. After spending a long time on the net, Lucy was becoming extremely skilled in the art of netrunning. But after one adventure, her father, who noticed her talent, but also how she liked to run away from the family, forced her into taking a skills test at his corporation of Arasaka, where she would be fully analysed and abruptly assigned to the corp's netrunning outfit. With this outfit, Lucy had one vital task, and that was recovering old, lost or archived information about data resting somewhere within the depths of the old net, something Militech had done to slow Arasaka down during the Fourth Corporate War, as well as the attacks by Raish Bartmoss. Arasaka, desperate to get their hands on the data using all of the netrunners, did not think about their well-being at all, and because of it, many of Lucy's peers, mere kids, were dying and dropping like flies. Lucy, seeing all of this, did what she did best and ran from Arasaka's rule, but did not return home, knowing full well that it would not go down well with her father at all, and actually fearing what he'd do to her. Lucy had one option, and that was venturing all over Europe, trying to find a place to settle down. Whilst covering all of Europe, Lucy knew she had to do something to settle down, and here sought out her mother, who at some point had rejoined the gang of the 404 Squadron. Lucy would go on to find her, but would be unsure what her mother's intentions would be, and once again knew it was a bad choice, and again fled, until finally she found herself on the other side of the Atlantic, roaming all over the different American states. Eventually, Lucy found herself within the neon metropolis of Night City, pretty much giving up here, believing that nowhere was safe for her. It was here within Night City that Lucy decided that Earth was not safe for her, and one day she'd get enough funds to flee to the colony up on Luna. This triggered Lucy to use her skills to good use, as she would operate as part of petty thefts, but rarely, if ever, trained her sights on fatter loot. But that was to all change when she would go on to meet another netrunner under the name of Kiwi, who would be a part of her own crew under the leadership of Maine, and seeing Lucy's skills in action, recruited her into the gang. The rest of her story would be told within her travels in Maine's crew and meeting David Martinez, who gave her a glimpse at what life would be like if she were to settle down with someone she truly cared about within Night City, and one day reach that dream of venturing to Luna and seeing the world in a completely different light. Dorio Gunnarsdóttir was born within Iceland to her parents who were both accomplished athletes. Dorio doesn't remember much about her upbringing, but most of her time was spent within gyms training to be the next best athlete like her parents, as well as consuming uber healthy meals to keep herself fully energized for more training and for the constant traveling that she would do, going from one weightlifting event or track event. It's pretty clear from this upbringing that her parents were grooming her into becoming a world-class athlete and to continue their legacy. At some point, however, the family would go to Night City as part of their athletic tour. When they got here for a track meet at the West Coast Grand Prix circuit, this was apparently the turning point for Dorio's father, as her mother stated it had broken him. During this event, Dorio's father became the event's top hammer thrower and collected an absolute ton of prize money. But for him, it wasn't enough. To him, the money were mere peanuts, and he could make far more by winning single punch-up fights on the underground fight circuit run by the gang known as the Animals. Mega chromed up individuals who wanted to essentially make themselves look like the animals they most related with, upgrading arm cybernetics to have the strength of a gorilla, or upgrading their legs to run fast like a cheetah. With that, the father would go on to sign up for one of their tournaments, which would be an incredible challenge considering most animals are close to being world-class athletes due to their cybernetics and training. But despite all of that, Dorio's father came up on top, and the family was rewarded massively because of it. Her mother, however, absolutely hated what had happened and what he had become, even though she had been given a super comfy life in this beautiful neon city. Despite her worries, Dorio and her mother continued to train, hoping that nothing would happen to Dorio's father. But sadly, the mother's worries became true as a shootout happened between the Animals gang and the Pacifica gang known as the Voodoo Boys. Unfortunately for Dorio's father, he would be caught in the crossfire, being ripped apart, literally, by the bullets coming from both sides of the area. The only thing left of him was a scraping of his face, which the family could use to identify him. This whole event saw the family's comfy lifestyle come crashing down completely, but despite losing their beloved family member, the two continued to pump iron day after day. This eventually bored Dorio as she just witnessed her mum on an endless grind to become a professional athlete, sacrificing everything to make it happen. But for Dorio, this was not the life she wanted. On top of that, she also had a bitter hatred for all of the Night City gangs, all due to them taking her father from her. The animals and the voodoo boys especially were considered the worst, as a black corner of her heart was reserved for them. But as a weightlifter, there wasn't much she could do about it. She needed to become something else. Not breaking away from her mother immediately, Dorio would occasionally skip a practice and a meet to wander the city streets, look down dark alleys, ultimately searching for something. What that was, she didn't know yet, however. Eventually, she would go on to purchase herself a gun, which she felt was the natural thing to do. With her new weapon, she would begin planning on taking out the animals, focusing on one guy specifically who she would observe, follow, stalk, and ultimately, Dorio decided that this gonk, who was unaware of her, would die. She would kill him and quench her rising hatred. One night, Dorio followed him to a bar, continued to watch him as he sat there and drank, drinking lots of alcohol. And eventually, he stood up to go to the toilet. Dorio, still hidden from his sight, followed him into the toilet and stuck the barrel of her gun to his head. But just as she had the intention of killing this gonk, she would fail to pull the trigger. A couple of seconds later, Dorio found herself on the floor with a broken nose, the animal standing over her, barrel of her gun now staring her in the face. But like Dorio, he didn't fire either, mainly because his brain had now been splattered all over the place, coating the walls. The man standing with the gun in hand, responsible for killing the animal, was none other than Maine himself, who funnily enough had been stalking Dorio ever since she had started stalking the now dead goon. Helping Dorio up, Maine stated he was looking for people to set up his crew of Edgerunners, finally giving Dorio that purpose she had been looking for. And within a heartbeat, she agreed and signed on to this new crew where she and Maine would also start dating and looking after each other on every mission until they both sadly lost their lives during their final gig with the others of their crew of Edgerunners. Speaking of Maine, our leader of the Edgerunners crew, he would be born the son of a jazz singer, a woman who travelled around what used to be the lower 48, singing in bars and lounges, praying that one day she would be scouted out and signed by a big promoter. This unfortunately never happened for her, but something big did happen when she was performing at a concert within Portland, Maine. Here she would vomit after performing as part of a morning concert and quickly realised that she was indeed pregnant. Who the father was, however, she had no idea, as she could not recall who she had been with that would make sense mathematically. The only thing that she did know was that she really enjoyed being in Portland and the state of Maine specifically, as it had been good to her in many ways, and with that thought, she knew she wanted to settle down here. Knowing she needed to support herself and her new child, Maine's mother signed on as a waitress at a local diner where she would spend 10 years of her life there, raising her son, who she would name after the state she loved so much. When Maine was growing up, he was a very small child who was picked on all of the time, getting himself beaten up most days by older kids and people his own age that used him as a punching bag. With this happening day in, day out, Maine made a promise to himself that he would make himself big and, more importantly, strong, so he could show all of those who picked on him who's boss. Here he started to train and take part in underground boxing circuits and eventually would go on to win one. With those winnings, he would go on to buy his first piece of chrome, titanium metacarpals and phalanges in his right hand, allowing him to knock out anyone who came into contact with his new fists. When his mum tragically passed away, Maine took up regular jobs as a bouncer at different clubs all around. That said, he never really stayed at the same job, mainly due to the fact that anyone who messed with him when attending that club would have to deal with his fists, and they would leave with a mincemeat of a face, which did not go down down well with the management. One example tells of him beating up and dropping 5 fridge-sized dudes with identical patriotically themed box cuts. Turns out these individuals were NUSA Spec Ops, and Maine had taken them all out. This did not go down well at all, and because of it, Maine was banned from working at that specific club. The day after that, however, after hearing news of his exploits, Maine was called and offered a job by the NUSA Spec Ops themselves. Realizing he was being given full permission by the government to unleash the beast, Maine signed on without hesitation. However, his loyalty to the NUSA didn't last long, as his bravado quickly vanished, as he would go on to watch South American villages burn time and time again in their operations, which did not sit right with him after a while. For 2 years, Maine served with the Spec Ops unit until finally he gave in and took his discharge. Solomon Reed, who served with Maine during these years and worked well with him, offered him a job after he discharged from Spec Ops in something a little different. That was building up a network of spies in Night City to support the NUSA's unification war effort. Maine, however, wasn't big on this idea and quickly turned down Reed's offer, but he did see potential in Night City itself, a place where he could pick up independent contract work and make a living for himself without having anyone watching over him. With that all decided and his NUSA past behind him, he set out to the Neon City to become an Edgerunner, and with it, set up his legendary Edgerunner crew, who have arguably all become Night City legends now. The wildly popular and lovable Rebecca was born and raised within Night City itself, knowing the ins and outs of how the whole city works, only really leaving the city walls twice in her lifetime. Funnily enough, Rebecca is born into Night City royalty, as her father, known as Papa Sunrise, was one of the city's best known Edgerunners, until one day where he suddenly vanished without anyone knowing where he went. It was almost like the whole world had swallowed him whole. As for Rebecca's mother, she too had left her when she was just 6 years of age, meaning that Rebecca and her big brother Pilar were orphans in the terrifying Night City, left to just defend themselves from all of the horrors that could hit them. Pilar was most affected by their father leaving them, as he looked up to him completely. He saw him as nothing short of amazing and had trained him in the art of being an Edgerunner himself, and even though it was incredibly hard for Pilar and Papa Sunrise, they kept at it, with Papa teaching him everything he could. But then after his disappearance, Pilar convinced himself that his dad was taken out in an unfair fight, as he was not easy to take out, and there was no way anyone could get the jump on him in a fair fight. He truly believed his dad was now dead and killed by true degenerates, and now pledged his whole life to tracking down those killers and murder them harder than they had murdered his father. But even though that is what he really wanted, he had to look after his little sister, as she was the priority right now, especially with the fact that their whole home had been quickly repossessed to make up for Papa Sunrise's alleged gambling debts, and with that, all of the family's eddies disappeared mysteriously. To make money, the two had no choice but to hit the streets, doing gigs to make money, both of them living in their dad's broken down car. Pilar, being the big brother, promised that he would one day get them off the streets fast, and would do everything he could to make it happen and prove that he was a solid merc and soon to be a well-known Edgerunner. Unfortunately for the two, their dad's friends and acquaintances turned their back on them as well. There were only a few who were willing to help, with one being Wakako Okada, the legendary fixer from Watson, who Pilar would name as Auntie, who would provide them with regular gigs as well as recommending both of them to others. But despite that, it was tough for the two, and that was mainly because of Rebecca herself. Rebecca didn't have a close relationship with her father, so trying to relate to Pilar and his ambitions was hard. All she remembered of him was the way he spoke about her, saying he only ever spoke to her to put her down, saying she was being just like her mum, emotional, unpredictable, and too compassionate. Whilst that might have been hard to hear, that was exactly who Rebecca was, and still was up to her death in 2076. But unfortunately, it really did affect her life as an Edgerunner. One example of how these characteristics affected Rebecca was when she had a meeting with Wakako. Rebecca would turn up late to this important meeting because she stood up for a defenseless waitress who was being threatened by a crew of animals, which did not go down well with Wakako. Another example was when she was going about her day-to-day, she stopped everything she was doing to just cuddle a painfully cute puppy, which garnered the attention of a group of passing scavs. But the biggest example, and the one any other Edgerunner would hate hearing, was when she completed one gig, reached the target, but instead of taking him out, Rebecca spared him and took him home, allowing him to sleep with a roof over his head, with Rebecca simply stating he had such sad eyes, the poor gonk. Due to these actions, Papa Sunrise honestly believes she would end up in an early grave as she was far too compassionate. This did not sit well with Rebecca, obviously, and because of it created a tense rift between her and her brother as they both tried to become successful Edgerunners. That said, Rebecca wasn't even sure she wanted to be an Edgerunner early on. She spent months soul searching and for a good while leant towards the answer of simply no, she would not become an Edgerunner. Pilar realized by this point that Rebecca was the thing holding him back, as she would, in his eyes, sink every mission they went on, and because of it, he needed to rein her in if they were to succeed. This led Pilar to seek out a crew to help guide them and help them on their overall goal, and it was here where he would meet with Maine and his Edgerunner crew, and with that was finally on his path of becoming a Night City legend. With him joining, he also brought along his sister, who was also welcomed into the crew. It's just a shame that neither of them got to do what they really set out to do in life, and to some extent their father saw it coming, especially with Rebecca, who was to some extent too attached to her crew members that it got her killed on their final gig. One of the original members of Maine's crew was a young netrunner named Sasha Yakovleva, who was the daughter of Galina Valieva and the young sister of Stella Ramos, an NCPD police officer in the year of 2077. Sadly, when Sasha was just a young girl, her mother would die due to some horrible side effects from Biotechnica's latest painkillers that were on the market. When she went into adulthood, Sasha went on to join Maine and his crew as they had heard about her netrunning skills. Early on in their activities, Sasha would jump to action when her crew would be offered a contract to infiltrate the Biotechnica Night City headquarters to extract vital secret financial records about Chu-2, as well as one of their latest projects, a new immunosuppressant prototype known as 0.091. As the team broke up, Sasha would not only find the information they were hired to find, but also information on the painkillers her mother had died to, known as Securicine. It was made clear to Sasha finding this that these painkillers were not fit for human consumption, as they were known to cause gradual neurodegeneration. But Biotechnica saw the financial potential of these painkillers and knew they were too profitable to not release into the wider world, and instead of pulling them for more research, they would just release them without care of the consequences. Sasha knew she couldn't just sit back and accept this, and told herself this was her opportunity to do right for her mother, and started to upload the entire Securicine database file to the Network 54 news tip line. But whilst doing it, Maine's communication jammer went down, and Biotechnica were quickly on Sasha's tail, sending in a group of security bots to her location. Setting up a perimeter, Sasha tried to hold them back, but knew she was not going to make it. Biotechnica were going to get her for exposing their secret information. Cutting off communication with her crew, Sasha held out as long as possible to make sure all of the data was transmitted, and once it did, sadly, Sasha was shot, triggering the explosives she had set up, blowing up the entire office she was in. Maine would later find Sasha's body on top of a car outside, completely lifeless, and said their final goodbye to their loyal netrunner. But whilst Biotechnica shut down Sasha, she had exposed their extremely damaging drug of Securicine to the whole of Night City, hitting them with some really damaging PR, shocking quite a few people who saw that Biotechnica put their profits first before human life. But Maine had lost a vital member of their team, and now they needed a reliable netrunner to have as their new crew member. Known to all as Kiwi, she has no recollection of her parents whatsoever. It is most likely that when she was no older than a toddler, she would go on to be sold to a corp factory where her small hands would be able to work on the machinery within the production lines there. Here she would work alongside many other kids of similar ages, all working on giant machines. But Kiwi seemed to stand out compared to the others, at least in the factory foreman's eyes anyway, as he was going to protect her and help her when she most needed it, befriending her in the process. When the appropriate time came, she would go on to be promoted by him, given regular raises and essentially given a more comfortable role there. But this was all a ploy set up by him. When the time came, he propositioned her, framing it as a debt Kiwi owed him and that she wasn't gifted it at all. Kiwi, now much older, refused what the foreman was doing, which ultimately led him to selling her off to a den of iniquity, which was pretty much a brothel or something similar to that. Kiwi wasn't just an ordinary worker at this point, however. She was extremely unique as she came equipped with tech knowledge from the factory and was extremely knowledgeable about things such as microcontrollers, sub-assemblies and shards. So much so that she built herself a gizmo that inured her to senses and cut off all emotional responses to the work she had to do, allowing her to continue surviving. But during her time in this horrible place, Kiwi encountered a client who had gorilla arms equipped and was extremely brutish. Here he would rip off her part of her jaw with these arms, leading to her missing her whole lower face. Kiwi concluded after the shock of it all that she would not have it reconstructed as she was done with it, as well as the place that she worked. Quickly learning from everything that had just happened to her, Kiwi got into netrunning, delving into it as much as she could. She found it satisfyingly challenging, which allowed her to stay motivated and be the best she could be. Now extremely proficient in netrunning, Kiwi targeted the cat house she just quit from, as well as the factory she was housed at in her early life, and hit them with multiple short circuits, which caused both of the buildings to burn down completely, with the foreman who misled her and betrayed her to burn inside. Kiwi had now settled the score and was free from them finally. With that, she covered her massive jaw scar up so no one could see what was underneath, and set out on her new life path. Here, she headed off for Night City, taking on small netrunning gigs, until one day she came into contact with Rebecca, who saw her skills, introducing her to Maine, and thus became the crew's new netrunner. Falco, the crew's driver, was born and raised within the free state of Texas. Falco's parents owned mass amounts of land that they could cultivate alongside the mega corporation of Biotechnica to use on things such as meat production and chew-too. With both his parents owning this land, Falco was the rightful heir to inherit it, which sounded great for him as his favorite pastime living there was driving around on the tractors. Although Falco didn't drive them how they were meant to be driven. Instead, he would just hit the accelerator and keep it floored to the ground, which was a sight to behold for all the other tractor drivers as this heavy piece of machinery shot across all of the fields. The thing was, he hadn't modified these tractors to go faster and take bends with a lot of speed. Falco just had no fear and was able to just keep his foot down where others lifted, not wanting to flip their vehicles. Essentially, Falco is the Sebastian Loeb of the cyberpunk world, and if anyone understood that reference, let me know in the comments below. Eventually, Falco went on to different things as he moved into a stock car, entering races on the local circuit. This proved he was a phenomenal driver and had some serious talent. Not only was he extremely fast, but he also was extremely cool-headed and never really caved to the pressure of his competitors and made moves others hadn't seen before. It didn't take long before Falco had dominated the local circuit and started looking at becoming a pro racer on the global scene, in which he also dominated. Basically, the Texas version of Max Verstappen by this point in time. After going on to have a dozen-plus race win streak, Falco looked at a new challenge, one that took him into Night City, racing against some of the fastest but also craziest drivers from around the world, as well as tracks that were extremely hazardous and not for the faint of heart. Competing in these races, however, was now different. Falco wasn't winning all of the time, unlike his time on the international circuits, but Falco enjoyed it far more, and he was still considered one of the best racers out there, as he would fight one-on-one and win against Night City's racing greats, Rearview and Jeremy Taylor. Beating Rearview got them both talking, where he would be offered his first paid gig. This was to collect a couple of Edgerunners and pull off a heist at an orbital air warehouse. After this, Falco became a renowned name within the afterlife, and he absolutely loved his new life, as it came with a lot of tension and risk, and many fixers wanted him for their gigs. Falco from this point was enjoying his life a lot. He got the thrill from going at high speeds, had extremely risky gigs to go on regularly, and was renowned across Night City. His racing life was now officially over, however, only occasionally hitting the tracks. But his new life as a professional Edgerunner driver had begun, one that would massively help out Maine and his crew in their ultimate goal. We end on David Martinez. Now, we know quite a lot about David, but there are still things to be explored, the main one being about David's father or how he was born. David's parents' story is like those classic rom-com films, set in a big city, a man and a woman walking down the street, the woman suddenly stops due to a contraction, a big one that knocks the wind out of her. The guy flags down the first available cab, he and the woman clumsily tumble into the back seat, and the cab speeds off for the hospital. This was essentially how David came into the world, sort of. When David's mum Gloria, an EMT, was in the back of a speeding ambulance, she would feel her water break while she was trying to reattach the arm of an Edgerunner who had gotten it shotten off during the gig. She couldn't stop, however. She had to just keep going as she sutured his arm. Eventually, she would get it done, and then when it was back on, told the Edgerunner to swap seats with her and went on to deliver her own baby, whilst the ambulance continued to speed towards the hospital. The Edgerunner she went on to help would be the one to cut the umbilical cord using his mantis blade within the arm Gloria had helped save. Something that is absolutely hilarious to imagine and somewhat poetic. In that moment, Gloria and David shared a close bond, knowing that she would do absolutely anything for him, and despite everything going on, she would never let him down. The two would go on to live within the Night City area of Santo Domingo, which was not the kindest of areas to live within, and that's an understatement. It was absolutely filled with trash, filth, doorfers, psychos, and death at every corner. But Gloria made sure David was safe from it all, as she would shelter him from these horrors. The problem for Gloria was David didn't like the safe, mundane life that she was trying to give him. It absolutely bored the hell out of him, as he wanted to enjoy life and see what it was all about. David just felt in his bones that he was destined to be something great, and that he would make a mark on this city. With this mindset, David would scope out and keep tabs on anyone and everyone in and around Mega Building H4, including any Edgerunners he'd never seen before, in which David would talk their ear off. For the local Ripper Doc, for example, if they were to bring in brand new chrome, David would be the first one to go into the clinic just to look at it, hoping one day he could add it to himself. Because of this behavior, there were many times where David would be beaten up for getting involved in things he shouldn't. But this did not stop David from continuing this curious lifestyle. He just needed to know everything that was going on in this dangerous world. One day when David was watching everything going on, a son of 6th Street gang member got annoyed that David was there, would track him down, pin him to the floor, and just started punching. This continued until the other kid broke his own hand and started wailing out in front of everyone. For David, however, he would just laugh at the kid whilst covered in tons of blood during and after the beating for a whole hour. This played perfectly into David's hands, as everyone in the hood was too scared to go near David after this, and because of it, everyone left him alone from this point on. It was at this moment where David knew that he was indeed meant for greatness, and one day he would do great things. It was probably this mindset that David had since he was very young that allowed him to eventually make his mark on the city, take on the biggest corporations, chrome up so much, and become a Night City legend. And even though he went way too early, the impact he made on this neon city will forever be remembered, especially within the Edgerunner world. But for now, these have been all of the new origin stories of the Edgerunners crew from the TV series, all told thanks to the brand new mission kit for Cyberpunk Red made by Talsorian Games, which also has some incredible new lore about the whole of Night City's layout, the gangs and corporations, as well as a tale following on from the events of David and Maine's crew in 2076, which involves Gloria's iconic EMT jacket. Definitely check it out if you can, as it is a cyberpunk lore reader's dream. So thank you all for watching this video, and a big shout out to my patrons for allowing me to make these videos on a regular basis, including my small fishes, my big fishes Greg and Noxvox, my YouTube channel Wise Ones, Sith Lord 906, Video Gamer and RIP City, my sharks Alfred Correa, Jason X117 and Naya Park, and my megalodons Sinus Bear Clams 83 and Hazy Thoughts. A massive thank you to Talsorian Games for sending me a review copy of this new expansion kit for Cyberpunk Red, and more videos on its new lore will be coming out very soon. But that is all for now. Thank you so much for watching again, and I shall see you all in the next one. Cheers.